Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode in our Black Lives Matter discussion series. The book that we are discussing today is The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl by Issa Rae, and this is a nonfiction book that was written in 2015. And before we jump into discussing the book, why don't we just go around and introduce ourselves just to give our viewers an idea of who they're listening to. So I'm Lucy. I am a library tech and I work in the youth department.
I'm Beth, and I'm also a library tech in the outreach team of the library.
And I, much like Beth, well, my name is Jacob. I am also a library tech and I work in the outreach department.
I'll finish it out. My name is Marissa. I am also in the outreach department.
I'm Alex, and I work in the library's youth department.
My name is Amanda, and I work alongside Lucy and Alex in the youth department, but we also dabble in lots of teen and adult programming as well.
I'm Elizabeth, and I'm a library technician in the archives.
I'm Dee, and I am a desk clerk since 2019.
All right. So I guess my first question, and it kind of has a couple parts, but it would essentially be what you thought of the book. But I'm also wondering what you brought to the book with you, in the sense that, did you have any familiarity with Issa Rae before you read this? And if so, what? And then if you did, in what way do you think that influenced your reading of it? So that's kind of a big question, but that's fine. We can take our time and talk about it.
I guess I'll start. I had watched season 1 of Insecure back when it came out, and I liked it. Thought it was really funny and good at commenting on social issues that hadn't really been addressed, I felt, in other shows at the time. So I was excited to read this, and I thought there were definitely some really funny parts. She's definitely a good comedian, and I enjoyed the book. So I'd be interested to go back and watch Insecure again, because I never watched after the first season, because it's kind of like that thing where it came out and then there was a bunch of time in between and never got back to it. So yeah, I'd be interested to revisit some of her other works.
I just need to chime in because I also watched, I watched probably, well, it turns out 3 seasons. I just started rewatching the 3rd season, realized that I had already seen it. But anyway, it had been a few years. And I'm so glad I just got access again to HBO. So really, I love the show, so I knew I'd like the book, and I did. I could understand a lot of her, storylines just based on her personality. I didn't know that she was of African descent, and that what her birth name was.
I feel like when I signed up for this book discussion, I'd also just watched the 1st season of Insecure. And so when I saw this book come through, I was like, oh, that'll be fun. And I did think it was interesting as a reader for somebody who's seen the show. I really enjoyed reading the book and hearing more about her and her style and her life, because I really didn't know much about her as a person, or where her background was, or other shows and things she had done. So for me, it was helpful. And I liked reading more about her story. It helped me understand sort of how the show would have became put together after some of the other shows that she worked on. So I like that insight.
Well, I guess I just have to admit, with all things pop culture, I had just never heard of her until the opportunity to do this discussion came up. And being an awkward person, I'm just like, oh, cool. How do other awkward people do? But yeah, I was definitely impressed by what I found there. It was really cool.
You stole my intro, Alex.
Sorry.
A person who has an abundance of experience as an awkward white girl. I was really interested in reading this book, which I loved. Many things relate, in particular the inability to dance.
Oh, I thought that was the funniest part of the whole book. The scene where she joins the center of the dance circle. That had me screaming and laughing out loud on my couch.
Well, for me, it's been on my list of like things to read, things to watch and read, and then I haven't yet. So oddly enough, like my most common interaction with her is that her name is always a New York Times crossword clue, it seems like. So this was exciting to like put some stories to that. And then now I have a redoubled effort. Her stuff's at the top of my to watch list now. So hopefully I'll actually get to it now.
That's funny, Marissa. I have seen her name quite a lot in the crossword puzzle. I had actually watched all 5 seasons of Insecure before I read this book, which was really an interesting way to approach it, because I could definitely see like direct parts of the book that came out in the show, even if they were something that was happening to another character in the show, which was really interesting. But I also feel like, you know, there's a big arc in the show, and it went for a long time between the beginning of the 1st season and the end of the 5th season. And so you could see, like, reading this book a little bit where she felt immature, not immature, but you can see where she's had growth since this book in the way, like, I mean, while, you know, she's a fictional character in her show, but I just see sort of a different person between this book and the end of her show. So that was a very interesting way to approach it. Dee, you brought up relatability, and I was wondering if other people found parts of this book relatable, if they thought the book in general was relatable.
Yeah. Like her parents exhibit so many of the behaviors that my parents subjected their kids to. Like, we're not just going to drop you off at the bus to summer camp. We're going to go on that bus with your little siblings and make as big a scene as humanly possible. And you will be fine regardless of your feelings. Like, yeah, there was definitely moments that were relatable.
Felt like I was reading another essay that someone wrote about this, and she was saying like she's a millennial, and there were a lot of pop culture references from the 90s, or like growing up in the age of the internet, kind of just like coming into existence and having this like vast untapped territory that like nobody was monitoring. And I thought that was really relatable, because I also was like in 95, 5 years old on the internet, like unsupervised. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, really, how did we come out this normal, if that makes sense, of like really unfettered chat rooms and just who are you talking to? Who do you say you are? All kinds of stuff. I really liked that first chapter. I thought that was very funny.
I was thinking of that more as a parent, and, you know, my kids being, you know, and just trying to think back like, well, at least the computer was in the living room and we had dial-up, you know, so couldn't really mess around too much. But yeah, she just cracked me up. So there was one thing she described that I feel like I saw on the show, and so maybe Lucy, you can tell me. Do you remember she talked about how she dressed all matchy and something? I don't remember if it was in college or high school, right? And I feel like that happened on the show, because I'm visualizing her in like an all red. And maybe I just have a really good imagination, or it happened on the show where she was just like red, everything in a red bow and red shoes, and her girlfriends were like giving her the side eye. But so
Yeah, was that in that, like, I do remember that, but was it in the book too that she dressed in all red and she showed up in like crypt area? Yeah. But I do
talk about it, but I
can't remember specifically if it happened in the show, but I do think there's definitely like things pointed out to her lack of fashion as compared to her friends. Like, you know, she loves her Converse shoes, and she's, she just, so I could see her almost, I can't remember specifically, but just like wearing all red and not
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
anything about it and just having it be in an episode, which would actually be
Right.
pretty funny.
'Cause she would enter somewhere, and I mean, and this happens from time to time, and she'll be like, and they look at her, she's like, what, and
Yeah.
you're wearing that. But anyway, I find her quite funny.
Having lived in LA for a while in a not so great part of town, that particular thing in the book of the all red was like horrifying to me. And then I'm like, oh yeah, her friend's going to tell her, you can't do that.
Yeah, I forgot about the fact that it was Crip colors too, or Bloods, whatever. What I really like about just her book, and we've had other young authors too, but I guess because she is relatable. And I like her style. I enjoyed the book a lot. But it makes me feel connected to the youth, and also Black culture, and hear what people are doing, what's in style, what are, just the vernacular. I just like to, I like to know about other cultures, so I feel connected.
Another thing that made me connect with her was, this idea that if you're really, really smart, you're just not cool, right? You don't know how to be cool because you're very intelligent. The other kids in your age group are not impressed by it. They're kind of like, yeah, stay away from that one, right? And I experienced that a lot in school, so I related a little bit to that as well. If other kids were out, smoking in the bathroom, I might be somewhere reading a book of poetry or something like that, and I just wasn't cool.
Yeah, I think, and she touches upon that. I mean, the book is The Misadventures of an Awkward Black Girl, and she touches a lot upon how there are these stereotypes, and she doesn't fall within those stereotypes. She's supposed to be a cool Black person, and yet she's nerdy and she can't dance. And so I think I loved her choices of just talking so much about pop culture and how, like, she had a passion for it and followed with it, but she was still awkward and didn't fall within those things, like she enjoyed swimming and she was a vegetarian, and those are things Black people aren't supposed to do, like under, the list of things that they are stereotypical things they are not supposed to do. So I enjoyed her frankness of just discussing those things and just breaking it apart and saying, no, you can be whatever you want and do whatever you want, whatever color you are. So I like that about it.
Yeah.
All that rap music, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, Alec. I just want to quickly say all that music that she's talking about in there was a little after my teenage years. I can't imagine my parents allowing any of it to have been played in our house. They allowed rock and roll, they allowed all kinds of other stuff, but that would not have gone over.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It was definitely like, it was sometimes books like these can give you this really awesome little window into parts of our culture that you don't have easy access to. So yeah, like Amanda was saying, like she's describing like the sort of interest stuff, like how groups sort of police behavior within the group,
Mhm.
and that was a really interesting perspective. Like I think as a culture we have a better understanding of how different groups try to police groups that are outside of their bubble, and here was a look inside, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and she also, I mean, she was proud of the fact that she couldn't be reduced to that stereotype. There's more to being Black than liking rap music, in her point of view.
But yeah, I think, and that's an interesting point to sort of take up, because like we are reading this in part of this Black Lives Matter series, but that's also just can be a book about how a Black person is moving through the world. And I think, she does discuss Blackness in this book a lot, and sometimes very tongue-in-cheek. She'll have like a chapter about, sort of a guide and how Blacks can talk to other people and other, but I think I'm wondering how you thought she towed the line between like having all that in there, but not making it a book necessarily entirely about race.
Mhm.
I thought the progression, oh, sorry.
You go ahead, you go ahead.
I just was going to say that I think the progression in the book, it's kind of like what you were saying, Lucy. She starts out in the book as, you know, she's young and she's not quite sure how she fits in. But as the book progresses and she goes through a lot of different perspectives on Blackness and what it's like to live in a part of the country where you're the Black person in an almost all white school, or you're a Black person living in a Black neighborhood in Los Angeles. But I think that overall in the book, she goes through, especially in her talk about her romantic encounters, she matures a lot. And she kind of, as she kind of states herself, she grows into her own skin, her own person. And I think by the end of the book, she makes it pretty clear what her life is for her. She enjoys being Black, but she also enjoys everything about her life. And she doesn't really necessarily think that being Black is that one thing that sets her apart. It's just a part of her. And to me, that's such a mature point in her life, I think, especially for someone so young.
Yeah. And I think the book is also a lot about being African,
Right.
as it is about being African American. So, and I think that's like an important, when we're talking about making a series of these film discussions in regards to Black Lives Matter, I had the same feeling when we read My Sister the Serial Killer, as well as having that African perspective is also really enlightening for me as the reader.
Yeah, the different languages, the different types of people. It's such an important part of her life. Having come from Senegal and having relatives there and family there.
Yeah, that whole aspect, and also her father being a doctor, and you know, there were aspects of her life that were really remarkable. I thought, you know, like going to live in Africa. Not everyone does that, or you know, start open to practice, and the way, yeah, he was in school, right, when in Maryland when they were growing up, so part of the time, and living apart, and just all that was really just an interesting part of her life, you know, that molded her, obviously. And you know, she did, I believe she married an African guy, so in real life, you know, so she was kind of reluctant, right, to like, oh, date, didn't she keep, or I may be mixing things up with other books, but you know, she'd be like, not another African guy, not a guy from Senegal, and you know, she'd run into these guys. Sounded like she married one, but
I think too, it's important that her family, part of her family is there. It's like my grandparents, nobody's out of the country for as far back as we go, right? Not, and yet she has family. There's a family home there. So going to Africa to her feels just like a normal thing, and she's close. I think that would be great to have that connection in your life.
Yeah, I think one thing I thought about too with like the topic of sort of the way she addresses Blackness in this book is it's like she's saying, I'm Black and, you know, these are the things I do, as opposed to saying I'm Black. So, you know, like she's not going to carry what is, she's not going to have this burden, which is not a burden, put upon her and carry it and put her story through that lens. And I do think that like her life going back to Africa, that was probably an important part to just provide a different context for all of that. I thought that a part that was interesting about the pop culture, which a lot of you have brought up, is how she talked about representation and where she saw that and where she didn't. And I wonder what people thought about that. And then also, because this book was written in 2015, what she puts in this book might be different than what you see today.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I just had a complete brain fart. Somebody else start talking.
Representation.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Sorry.
Wow.
Oh, Jacob, bring it.
It's
Yes.
called COVID brain fog.
So I thought the part where she writes the director of Love and Basketball was particularly important. Because I feel like we've talked about it a lot, but it really, really underlines and emphasizes the idea that representation does matter. Perhaps she would have never, well, no, that's not true, because she was always writing scripts and coming up with TV show ideas, but maybe that dream wouldn't have been as real if she never had that interaction with that person. And it really is, it is amazing how these interactions can change the course of your life.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, like as a gay person, you know, the ability to see somebody that you can identify with doing a thing, like it shouldn't make all that much difference on the surface. Like you should just be able, like, okay, that's the thing I want to do and I'm going to go do it. But just conceiving of it as something that could possibly be real, and just seeing somebody that you can sort of put you can sort of step into their shoes mentally, like that makes a huge difference. It was such an interesting letter, and it's like a completely banal point. Like that is the only time I've ever seen anyone end a letter with like, and good luck to you in all of your endeavors, in a way that was actually nice. That's your college professor really twisting the knife in 9 times out of 10, right? So
I think it goes to show that validation can be amazingly powerful. And are we still connected? Everyone's like frozen. Okay.
Yeah. Oh no, you're good.
Validation, even a small validation, is amazingly powerful for people. And sometimes not getting that validation can be even more powerful. It's amazing what kinds of things give us that desire to move forward, or determination, I think, to move forward.
Yeah, and I think as an introvert or somebody who views themselves already with these, like, if you're nerdy and you're awkward and you're an introvert, those aren't supposed to be a successful person who gets what they want quickly. And so you sort of have to navigate how to make it through the world. We've also got this this passion, this drive, these artistic abilities to be able to write and do, and you want to be able to put them to a format, which is step one, or put your ideas to place, and then to bring them to the table to write the letter to that person. That's a whole other step for a person who's an introvert. Even if you've got the skills and the passion, it's a whole other level to like go out the door and do that thing. So I identify with a lot of those parts in it. And so I liked watching or reading about just her like grow and develop over time and find out that she could still, like, she has some great screenplays. She wants to put them out in the world. It's just getting over that hurdle, that hump of these things. Plus she's like self-deprecating. She's hard on herself, but she also knows she's got a great product to put out there. So I was fascinated to read like her get over that and be able to do all she's done.
Yeah. But in terms of representation, I think that her contribution is so important. With every creative, artistic Black person who is able to get their work out in the world, it's another form of reinforcement for young people, young Black people everywhere, to think, oh, this girl did that, maybe I could do that too.
Mhm.
Yeah. She had a really interesting insight too about like the trouble getting that like representative content in front of the right people in Hollywood, you know? And like there's this sort of interplay. Was it Juno Diaz or who? I can't remember who else she was talking about. She's like, no, we're not monsters. We're just like straight up invisible. It's like this Ralph Ellison reference, you know, like we're just not, life would be simpler at least if people were completely monstrous, but really in her perspective, the biggest hurdle is just that like you can't get on somebody's radar, you know, and that was really the issue.
Yeah, no one sees you at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that being seen piece, like, you know, she talks about all this great representation that she felt she had in the 90s that was accessible to her. And then it kind of went away. And there was this like, oh, these stories aren't important, or there's no more to contribute. And I admire her for then taking like, you know, saying like, well, I'm not seeing this on this platform. I don't see it in TV and the movies. Well, what if I put it on the internet instead, you know, and sort of like, well, I'm going to make my own way to be seen. And I thought that was interesting. And also, you know, what you like Elizabeth and Marissa were talking about, having that early access to the internet, and just I'm wondering if you think like her unique connection to that, how that might have influenced who she did in fact turn out to be.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
definitely.
being introduced to it young, I think makes this such a difference. When you're young and you're curious, you want to figure everything out for yourself. You want to know how everything works. I think it makes a huge difference.
Because of the internet, she had access to such a wealth of information, whether that be rap lyrics or social connection.
Mhm.
And even today, sometimes I marvel at the ability of being like, oh, what was the name of that song? And I just like move my thumb around on a device for like 10 seconds, and then I have the answer. And I can see how having that access to information has affected my generation across the board.
Mhm.
I think in terms of her like creative writing, she was already creating all these characters for herself as a kid, and like successfully passing herself off as this other person on the internet. So I think that like open freedom to have that and just like basically go wild and do whatever you want and create this whole world where you're another person probably had an impact on her ability to like get inside other characters' heads and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that cracked me up. I heard an echo. Anyway, yeah, I thought that was hilarious. But then I was like, oh my God, what were my kids doing? You know?
They were doing that.
They were doing that.
Yeah, and she's so honest too about like exactly what her interactions were. And it's like, I can relate to what you're saying, Beth, because I was, you know, I didn't have kids yet, but I was not a kid myself. And so it's like, I read that as you're like kind of horrified, like, oh my gosh. But then Elizabeth, you're saying like she has these, it helped her to create and invent. So, you know, it's sort of this thing that an adult might think is shocking, but then it gave her a springboard for who she is now. And I think like she has this honesty throughout the book, and she sort of uses humor in a lot of interesting ways. And I'm just wondering, like, if you notice specific ways where you thought she used humor effectively to talk about something that was very private or difficult. or somewhere where she used it, or maybe it seemed like she crossed a line.
I was taken aback about her honesty in being a serial cheater,
Yes.
especially when that came right after the chapter about how her father's infidelity affected her and her family. Now that's not, I guess it doesn't deal with your question directly in terms of how did she use humor to discuss that thing, but that was something where I was like, whoa, that's really honest. And I kind of yearned for her to make that connection between her father and her.
Yeah. It wasn't, that wasn't her demonstrating her awkwardness. Like that was just mean, you know? Yeah, and it mirrors enough like behavior I've seen in like the gay dating world where I'm just like, no, I cannot follow you here. There's some clever turns of phrase in there. Like she's talking about like her first kiss. It wasn't a public display of affection. It was a public display of acquaintance, you know? And like that was, caught myself like literally laughing out loud at that part. You know, it's like, okay, well played, but still don't do that.
I thought she had a nice way of, or I guess a perceptive way of describing herself, her younger self, and then her commentary on it as her younger self was hilarious. It was like, who sees themselves in that way? Who sees that younger self and doesn't feel just that pain or whatever they were going through at the time, but instead sees it as, oh my God, this was so hilarious. I think one time she's talking about the way she was dressed and how she must have looked, but at the time she thought she was awesome.
Can I admit something?
Yes, please do.
I wanted the book to be more laugh out loud funny than it was. Like I listened to the audio and I wanted more humor. I don't know what could have been different. Was it the way it was, she read it, or I wanted more laugh out loud humor. I wanted to fall on the floor. And so I don't know if I missed a piece or, and as a self-deprecating human as what she appears to be, I feel like most of the book was peppered with just like this humor, like, ironic, like rolling her eyes as she's telling the story. So I feel like most of it is read that way. So, or written that way. So for me, I didn't have these specific pieces that were just like, that stood out as more funny than others. It was all sort of like just peppered through it enough for me where it was all sort of humorous and just like self-loathing and self-deprecating. But I didn't fall on the floor laughing and I wanted to, so.
I wonder if the publisher or editor or whatever would have thought that like real laugh out loud things would be just too, people would be taken aback by it, and the race thing entering into that because of it, not being, something that, how they like things may not sell as well coming from this group or that group. I'm just thinking about devil's advocate, not that I believe in that, but maybe that she would have wanted to put more in that got edited out because it would have been too like, well, racy-ish, but I don't know. The reason I thought it was not laugh out loud, I mean, there were things I giggled about for sure, but I'm a lot older than her. There wasn't the same kind of relationship to what's happening in one's life. The dating, for example. It's been a long, long, long time since I've dated. So,
I did find some of the dating stuff to be laugh out loud hilarious though. And maybe it's a poor reflection on me, but in particular, I'm thinking about meeting this man that she decided to give a chance to. Like they had this rule among her friends that give it a try. And this guy wants to hold her hand, and her description of the hand holding was just like, when she finally just writes the word ew, I'm like, yeah.
Well, that part was funny to me because I'm the hand holder.
Oh,
And I was like,
I don't think all hand holding is like
I
that.
don't like
I
this.
think this
I was
guy,
like, I've been called out on the carpet.
yeah. I think the guy that she had just met, she thought was going a little overboard.
It was the wrong kind of squishy romantic. Like there's the right person for that guy out there somewhere, and we all hope that he found that person, right? But like they just were
Yeah.
cheap puzzle pieces that just did not fit, you know.
Maybe by the time he finds that person, he'll be a little less pushy about it. Like the whole phone call afterward with,
Oh.
are you looking at
Just
them?
the moon.
Yeah,
Which, by the way, is a direct quote from Joe Dirt. I'm just gonna say that.
Oh,
Okay.
is it?
Like that's like, I don't know if you grew up watching Joe Dirt, but anyways, and then he, upon meeting her, he texted her a poem.
Yeah,
Oh, Lord.
just all a little too over the top.
okay, that's hilarious that it came from Joe Dirt, though.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Are you looking at the same moon I'm looking at? I was like, this is Joe Dirt.
That's- Oh, boy. I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry.
Something about her humor. Well, going back to what you, so a question ago, maybe, just she used humor in the way she was describing her parents' marriage. I mean, everything all her awkwardness was through humor and self-deprecation. And I think she uses it well. It's a good tool for her because she cracks me up. And getting to see her again like last night, and just even little quick when I was watching the show, just little things like that just make me kind of smirk, just silly stuff. But so yeah, I hope y'all get to watch it again, or if you haven't.
It was an interesting ride for me, not really having any point of contact with anything else she's ever done. Because like the only mental image I had of her was like her picture on the cover of this book, and she's talking about like, like the she's getting up to the point where she's starting to talk about her dating life, and everything's just like, oh, she's awkward, she can't figure out her hair or her clothes or anything like that. And then it's just like the succession of like really hot guys from all over the world, and like, oh, we're speaking French together and only in French. And it was like, how did you get these guys? Like something does not this is not working. What's wrong here? So like I ended up just having to like Google her, and it's like, oh, she talks like this, but this woman is absolutely, utterly stunning. Like
Beautiful.
stunningly beautiful.
Yeah. Awkward my foot. Like you literally have a media empire. Like you are world renowned. Like people, you are actually the opposite of awkward. You're actually the most charismatic person, insofar as you have a 5-season television series loosely based on your own life.
Yeah, so beautiful.
Yeah,
so beautiful and effort.
You're dating international hunks.
But
But
it was
if you
before
see
that.
her, yeah, if you see her, like, I don't know if any of you watched the Awkward Black Girl like web series, but if you see her there, or even, yeah, especially there, when this book came out, and then you see her now on like the cover of Vogue, it just seems like you can see this confidence and this she just seems like a different person almost. But I also wonder, like, as an introvert, myself, and I think like a lot of her awkwardness comes from being introverted, if it doesn't, like sometimes you can do the thing and you can push yourself because it's what you have to do, but it might take everything out of you, and we don't see that side where it's like, because I think about that when I see her now, and I'm like, oh my God, you just, yeah, like, does she go home and it's just like, I can't now for 3 days or something, or no, you mean, so she's kind of amazing and interesting in that way, I think.
Yeah, she did seem wildly confident for someone self-described as awkward. And part of that seemed like she would maybe lean into not only self-deprecating, but almost like a willingness to kind of like be a villain. And I don't know if that was like, she just didn't want to apologize for things, or just like kind of leaning into it and be like, I'm awkward. just of like certain things, like when she was like, yeah, I know this was wrong, but it didn't seem like, I was like, but did you apologize for that? Or did you just like, yeah, I know I'm wrong, let's move on.
Like, but I'm awkward, you know, I was wrong,
Yeah.
but I'm awkward. So it's like, yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, because my only reference really, like, I knew what she looked like, and I knew that she's beautiful, and like obviously she has professional stylists and stuff, but like she definitely at some point had a glow up, sure. But then really what made me Google it was the fat chapter, where I was like, I do not believe you at all. And I Googled it. I was like, just show me one picture with you having an extra 5 pounds. Give me one picture. And there's some before and after pictures. And I'm like, these are the same.
Because it's not just,
I
it's
don't
not just,
see it.
yeah. Because like in the
Don't
book,
see
she's
it.
not talking 5 pounds. She's talking like 40, right? Like it's not a tiny amount of weight. It's not like, oh, I'll just eat right for a week and hit a treadmill, you know? Yeah, so that's a good point.
I mean, there was also a
Those
lot of other
chapters-
stuff to unpack in that chapter about how basically like super disordered eating. Like, yeah, I stopped eating for 2 weeks, did a juice cleanse, and then I was great. I was like, I don't think that's it, though.
Yeah, and she does talk about like the validity that you gain from that, like how that's the addiction, you know, that once you do that, people are like, oh my gosh, you're amazing transformation. And so it is this whole unhealthy thing that's bigger than her. There was one, like she says in that chapter, like it was no Kirstie Alley situation. And that did remind me of some other places where I felt like her humor switched from self-deprecating into maybe you needed a sensitivity read here, you know, like she talks about, yeah, there's like one part even where she says like, this guy was ruggedly handsome, he would probably drive a girl with low self-esteem to suicide. And it's like, you know, actually want to pull back a little. And there were a few moments that kind of stopped me. Like the trouble started as early as high school where people thought I was a lesbian. And I'm like, I don't think you want to put like the trouble and the lesbian, you know, so it's just like, it was interesting for me to see her branch outside of her self-deprecation into an area where I was kind of like, oh, not nice. But again, that, you know, yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, I can't remember exactly when, but there was one point where I had to flip to the front when this thing was published. You know, it's like, oh, 2015. Look how far our culture has shifted in such a short time.
Yeah.
That was probably within the realm of just like, you know, just acceptable at that point. And things have changed. Like, yeah, there were some, at one point she's imitating the accent her Asian piano teacher had, and I'm just like, oh, that would not get past a publisher today. Like that just would not. And like,
I felt like there were definitely some ableist tones coming through in that part too. Like I definitely had the same experience where there were just a lot of the things that Lucy just pulled out where I stopped and was like, I don't think that's good.
Red flags are popping out.
Yeah.
Especially the chapter, it wasn't even a chapter, it was like 3 paragraphs. So I was like, could have cut it out, just hit that backspace. The chapter about Black people interacting with Asian people, and I was like, oh lordy be. But then I was like, she's dating she's been dating a man for a number of years of Senegalese and Vietnamese. And then I was like, but does that make it so you can say that? And then I was like, why is me as Mr. Whitey like trying to figure out what she can and cannot say? I had a moment. And it sounds like there were some other moments that were had as well.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note, like, yeah, this was 2015, which at the same time seems like a million years ago, but it's only 7 years. But just that we're all like part of the same culture and we can all fall victim to the same prejudices, no matter what our intersectional identities are.
Yeah, that's
Well
a really
said.
good point. Yeah. Yeah. Has anyone read any other books that like remind them of this? You know, I know that like there are other sort of I don't know, it's not like a tell-all at all, but it's just like someone who has a celebrity who writes about how they got there, or
Well, I've read some of the other, like some of the female comedians, like the book, the back of this book mentions Mindy Kaling. Like I've probably read at least 5 of those different books, all white women. And I just went through a phase. Like I read, I think it was when the Tina Fey book Bossy Pants came out, like Tina Fey. I read the Amy Poehler one, Yes Please. I read Rachel Dratch had one. And for me, it was just hearing some of their comedic background and their story and how they started, because I already knew their work and was familiar with of their work on TV, and I was familiar with their comedy style. And I just went through I don't even know why, I decided to read a bunch of them back to back. I didn't really think about that when I didn't think about that a lot though when I was reading this book. Like for me, I read this a while ago, and I read it at the same time as, or right back to back, when I was reading The Pretty One by Kia Brown, which is another book in this series. And for me, it was just looking at, they're around the same age, they're both Black females trying to like make it in the world. And we mentioned like the internet and using online to sort of like find a place to have a voice and to be heard. And so for me, I was reminded of that when I was reading this, or when I think I read the pretty one after this one. I think I read it afterwards. So for me, there was that little bit of connection with their age and them finding their voice and being able to connect virtually.
I thought there were definitely some similar themes to the Pretty One, like in that they both address topics with like really radical honesty, which is something that I haven't encountered a lot. And the focus on pop culture, like they both devoted a significant amount of their books to music and how music has impacted their lives.
Mm-hmm. And then too, watching their evolution and their growth. Like they both, I think the Pretty One delves more into, I felt there was more of a visceral response to the growth in that book than this book, but there's both an evolution of them growing up, or just like becoming a different or a bigger and better person, you know, as they're learning and growing through all of their life experiences. And this one told wackier stories, I feel, than Kia Brown was telling, but there's still fun stories about growing up and some of the experiences that they were having.
I hadn't initially put this in the same context, but once you asked that question, I immediately thought of Phoebe Robinson, who's a comedian that I follow and love. And I think she has 3 books. I've only read 2 of them. Everything's Trash, but It's Okay, and You Can't Touch My Hair. And they both kind of deal with like being awkward and being like an awkward Black girl learning how to date and how to have style and all this stuff. And she talks about music, but she was raised in like a very white town in Ohio, so she was like obsessed with U2. And like she's just like very funny. They're very similar in that way, but also like totally different. But I highly recommend both of those books. I like her a lot, and they were definitely laugh out loud for me.
Yeah, I follow her on Instagram, and definitely great content. I recommend it.
Well, that's kind of a good way to segue into a question of like, does this book, The Awkward Black Girl, make you want to like, is there something else you want to connect with, either read or watch or pursue online? Like, you know, did it make you want to explore either her further, or is there something that you are going to read next that you'll connect with it, or just that you've read in general? That's good.
Well, I definitely would like to watch her show. I would definitely like to see another book from her, something more current that maybe has a little bit different perspective. I'd be curious to see that, but I definitely want to watch and maybe follow her so that I can see more.
I'd like to read the book that Marissa mentioned. I've seen that one and I've been curious about it. So, and then I'm going to keep watching Insecure because it makes me laugh.
Yeah, I quit watching after the first season. I think I watched maybe the first episode of the second season, then it got derailed by like 75 other shows because winter. So yeah, but I want to go back and watch more. But 5 seasons, Lucy, I didn't realize it was 5 seasons. I was thinking it was maybe 3.
Yeah, no, it's 5. Yeah, you know, and I would recommend like her the web series too, because some of them are really short and I find them to be like, some of them point out this just like awkward situations that I think are so universal. Like, you know, you're walking down a hall and you see someone at the other side really far away. Like, what do? You know, we've all had that. Like, do you make eye contact the whole way? At what point do you say hi? Like, when does the conversation happen? And she just acts this out in these little shows, or like when you pull up at a stop sign next to someone that you know, like what's the, you know, and so if you just want like 5 minutes of like, yes, I connect with that humor, I would recommend checking that out because it's all available to watch online. So
I was looking at those and I was going to say, I already mentioned that I wanted to finish Insecure. I already mentioned that I wanted to read the Phoebe Robinson books.
yeah.
So I want to tack that on. I watched like just a little bit of it, and the stop sign one was really funny.
Yeah.
She's like acting like she's talking into the phone, laughing.
I know.
Like, I don't see you there.
Yeah, I do think there's like some of those laugh out loud moments, Amanda, that you were seeking.
Yeah, I just laughed out loud like 6 times in the past 2 minutes. So
yeah, so that's like, maybe that's where you need to go to seek that. Well, I think we're getting close to an hour and I've sort of gone through my questions. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add about this book or this series in general? That
it was unfair to the movie Precious. It's like,
yeah,
I'm the only one. Yeah, I was like,
no, but I take her point
Precious.
though. I take her point that like, that's, you know, is that the way that Black women are going to be represented? Do you have to tick all these boxes that like are in the trauma category? And I thought that was sort of interesting. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you all for reading it and for joining me here today to discuss it. It was a lot of fun, and I hope everyone pursues their different ways of getting more Issa Rae. So thanks again.